The calling of Levi. Both Mark 2:14 and Luke 5:27-28 speak of the calling of Levi, while Matthew 9:9 calls him Matthew. But all the lists of the apostles refer to him as Matthew. Matthew 10, Mark 3, Luke 6, Acts 1. Yet, what is remarkable is that only in the first gospel is Matthew called the tax collector in the list of apostles. It may well be that the author is showing humility in this reference. In the least, however, Matthew's gospel is the only one which identifies the tax collector, whom Jesus called with Matthew the apostle. The most logical reason that the writer felt such liberty was because he knew of the identification personally. Thus he could either be Matthew himself or an associate who later compiled the work. Against the compiler theory is Matthew 9:9, which records the calling of Matthew. It is significant that it is more self-deprecating than Luke's account, which says that Matthew left everything and followed Jesus, while Matthew simply says that he got up and followed Jesus. If the first gospel were not by Matthew, one would be at a loss to explain why the author seemed to deprecate Matthew in such subtle ways. A later compiler who knew and respected Matthew, probably a disciple of his, or worse, a school of Matthew, simply does not fit the bill. In summary, each piece of evidence is hardly weighty on its own. But taken together, there is a cumulative impression made on the reader, that a bilingual Palestinian Jew, well acquainted with money, wrote this gospel. External testimony has already suggested Matthew as the author. The internal evidence does nothing to shake this impression. There is, therefore, little reason to doubt Matthew authorship. Objections to Matthew authorship. There are three primary objections to Matthew authorship, listed in descending order of value. 1. The improbable use of Mark by an apostle. 2. The high quality of the Greek of the Gospel. And 3. The non-biographical structure of the book. 1. Is covered in a video entitled Was Mark the First Gospel? 2. The high quality of the Greek is hardly an argument against Matthew authorship, for Matthew would have to have known both Aramaic and Greek, in order to collect taxes from the Jews and work for the Romans. Further, there is a growing consensus that Galilee of the first century was thoroughly bilingual, so much so that Greek was probably the native tongue of most Jews. 3. The systematic and non-biographical structure of Matthew does not preclude Matthew authorship. Such is a non sequitur, because one, a topically ordered account can yield biographical facts as easily as a strictly chronological account, and 2. Camel wrongly supposes that apostolicity is for some reason incapable of choosing anything other than a chronological framework. Conclusion on authorship. There are no major obstacles with Matthew authorship, in spite of what some scholars believe. On the positive side, the universal external evidence which seems to lack motivation for the choice of Matthew, as opposed to any other apostle, coupled with the subtle internal evidence, makes the traditional view still the most plausible one. The style of the book is exactly what would be expected of a man who was once a tax collector. Matthew has a keen interest in accounting. The book is very orderly and concise. Rather than write in chronological order, Matthew arranges this gospel through 6 discussions. Prologue. Of all the disciples, John, Peter or James, why did the first century church choose Matthew, if he did not write it? Matthew, being a tax collector, a traitor to Israel's high calling, was hated by the Jews. As a tax collector he was incapable of bearing testimony in a Jewish court of law, forbidden to receive their charitable gifts, or even to change money out of their treasury. He was ranked not only with harlots and heathens, but with highwaymen and murderers, and was even excommunicated from the synagogue. Matthew was treated similar to the worst kind of sinner. A person like him would not have been my first choice, unless he really was the author.